and we'll be letting you know what exactly we're going to be doing with that statement. But we're going, and then finally we'll close with a Sean Sweeney presenting on some of the political analysis of the title of this global forum, Climate Reset, Theirs and Ours. What is theirs? What is ours? Why is this important? And we'll close with some discussion time. So thank you everybody for being here. And once again, this global forum will take place in English, French, and Spanish. So if you are hearing me in English, just make sure that you are actually in the English channel. And the agenda is in the chat. If comrades would like to say hi and introduce themselves in the chat, that would also be fantastic, so we know who's in the room. But I'm going to actually first get started with Pablo, Pablo Messina from Comuna of Uruguay, who's going to share one of the conclusions and the analysis of a report that Red Capu, TUED's Public Pathway Research Network, has been creating over the past several months in preparation for COP30. And so I think I'll let Pablo sort of add more context to what this report was and its importance and its relationship to the public pathway. So Pablo, the floor is yours. 5 to 7 minutes, or 7 minutes.
Bien, ¿se ve la presentación?
Yes, can you see my presentation on screen? Yes. Can we have it in full screen in presentation mode? Well, if I knew how to do it. No, that's fine. We can see it now in presentation mode. Yes, that's it. Yes, yes. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. What I will present is a brief result of our work done by this team. To give you some context, some time ago, I think you remember that TUED tried to drive investigation in centers of investigation or teams of investigation that work with the trade unions. And so the CAPO network was set up. And we have 7 countries who joined this network. Our project began in this framework with the support of Nexus and under the organization of the Pan-Amazonic Trade Union Forum, because we wanted to contribute with evidence, new elements, and points to be discussed in COP30 that's taking place now in Berlin. So for 2 or 3 minutes, I will talk about the work we developed, and then, of course, you will have access to the report. So we had 4 researchers and trade unions to study the energy transition in the Amazonic region. The countries were Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, and we had researchers of these 4 countries, plus the coordination of TUED and an academic, let's say, coordination of Comuna Cooperative, where I work with the support of Nexus. The trade unions that participate, CUT Brazil, CUT Colombia, CEO, CUT Ecuador, and CATP Peru. For us, it was a big responsibility because it is always a challenge to talk about a fair transition in the Amazon region. So our researchers were Alantiago, Ana Catalina Herrera, and Carlos Vargas and Nicolas Bernas, as well as David Almeida from 5 countries, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, from 4 countries. So we had 10 months working together in this research, and our main goal was to understand the characteristics of this general situation and try and design a public path for the energy transition in this region, proposing a set of policies. Now, a few assumptions of our fair transition. We share the view that there is no energy transition without effective social transformation. We were looking for information to talk about the importance of decarbonizing the economy, which is key in this region where we have oil available and being explored in some of these countries. So we need to democratize this transition with social participation in the design, consultation, and implementation. The third goal, we were not able to go deeper in this goal, which is the development of technologies in the Global South and having a hierarchy of the public policies. Because I want to be very brief, because I do not have much time, let me tell you just a couple of things. So some of the things we already knew and we could confirm, and we now have evidence. First, there are huge gaps in the level of development in terms of transition policies in the region. One extreme would be Ecuador, where we found there is basically nothing. The whole discussion about the energy transition is only just beginning. There was, public bidding for oil exploration, but we do not really see public policies. On the other extreme, Brazil, where there is an effective construction of public policies to decarbonize the economy. But of course, there are contradictions and obstacles in the process. Number two, the development of the public sector, which is key for a fair energy transition. But the public sector is very different comparing the different countries. In Brazil, although we see development, also in Colombia, but, well, in Ecuador, we see the participation of the public sector. But in Peru, most of the process is led by the private sector. So we see different circumstances in the different countries to think about the public path towards this transition. And having a strong public sector is key for this public path. We also see political violence and conflict for the territory. And number four, in the interviews we had, we could see three key elements of concern in the labor movement.
We want very much that the just transition means not only that we have measures to remediate, but we have great loss in employment. Let's think about oil and mining that are key for the sector. And it seems that we have to do something that has a different name that implies other energies, other forms of energy. We're going to extract our resources, which benefits the local populations are not going to see. And so third, it's the absence of participation of social organizations in the planning and in the debates for implementation. And to conclude, and not to take too much longer, I already told you we have transition policies where there are advancements and some drawbacks and contradictions. One thing that we found is that in general, they are complementary in the whole region. It seems to be fundamental that we generate technologies, our own technology and developments in our own infrastructures and industrial complementarity. in the region. Brazil could lead this process because they have the best conditions to do it. There is also enormous challenge to strengthen the ecosystem and the public services in the region where there are very large deficits. And we are thinking about when we work with the unions and we mentioned that these had to be included in the labor movement. There is no clear vision about just transition. So it's necessary to have a trade union pedagogy or a learning process, an educational process, and also for the rest of the community and the populations in the territory. This would be a clear reading and consensus. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pablo, very much.
The research of this public pathway in the Amazon report, which again was presented in the CUT Brasil space, and I think really shows what a collaborative research can do when done between national centers, between researchers that are not, academic, but really plugged into trade union work. And, for me, before inviting our next speaker, Seb, to the floor, for me, one of the things that this report highlights is once again the importance of the public pathway and really customizing it to the needs and the particularities of a region as diverse as the Amazon. We know that ultimately life and work in the Amazon depends not just on the energy sector, but really guaranteeing that there are public hospitals, that there's public infrastructure, that there's public education and the right to energy to make all of this infrastructure a reality. And the only way to do that is really to decommodify these sectors, to decommodify energy and ensure it as a public good. And so that means very different arrangements of energy for very isolated communities in the Amazon that can look very different from the larger cities in the Amazon, like Leticia or Manaus, or Belém, where we are today. But regardless, it does need planning and very like centralized planning to make all these scales and diversity of communities really be able to celebrate this right. And there's a lot to say there, but because we have a full agenda, I'll now thank the microphone to Comrade Seb Munoz, who is also here with us in Belém, and he's been really at the forefront of almost every major action at COP30. So please, Seb, tell us what it's been like on the ground, both inside and outside of the COP, and a little bit of the political analysis of this moment. Bienvenido.
Thank you, Lala. Compass, I'm going to speak in English. But yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm not sure if at the forefront of ever major action is it's quite how I describe it. More like trying to salvage what might be possible from this beautiful process that's been the People's Summit. So I'll start there, right? On the 15th of November, we were expecting maybe 30,000 people to go out on the streets. That would be the kind of the balance from Brazilian movements who know what mobilizations are like in Belém. And so when we looked at the aerial shots and got a sense of like it's definitely more than 50, or it's definitely more than 70,000 people, I think it speaks to the type of process that was built here over 2 years. It speaks to the power of Brazilian movements. It speaks to the fact that CUT Brasil and particularly CUT Pará lives with intensity that which you were describing, Lala, here, which is like they are first and foremost Amazonian and also workers, right? And so that's why they were able to mobilize. I've never seen such an impressive display of red with the CUT flags all over the place. So I think that was a real kind of manifestation of everything that had been built. I won't say too much in terms of the details of what the People Summit was, but just to say it took place over a period of 2 years of coordination, mainly with Brazilian movements. It culminated in the last 5 days. It finished yesterday. During that time, there were particular moments of mobilization, lots of moments of debate and exchange, lots of moments of coming together to try and build consensus. And yesterday we had the declaration of the People's Summit, which was sort of handed over to the COP30 presidency and to a series of Brazilian ministers. And kind of beyond the detail of the declaration, I think being able to get there, being able to actually work together to arrive at a document that we, as movements of the world, are able to hand over in an action of accountability, a political action, to ensure that it is received and integrated. And that was a commitment from the presidency that it will be um, um, kind of adopted within the official agenda and documentation of the COP30 process. Um, it's a hugely important thing. One, because we haven't had a moment like this in a very long time, and secondly, because we need a moment like this. So it was real coming together of indigenous movements, the workers' movements, feminists, peasant movements, youth, queer communities, um, and a real contrast to what's been happening here in the in the in the negotiations. Um, because I was primarily outside on the People's Summit, I haven't followed inside as closely, but I'm going to offer some reflections and analysis from the global campaign to demand climate justice, which is the sort of one of the two constituency groups that make up the environmental groups in here in the COP30 process. But it really links, I think, to what was happening on the outside in terms of the People's Summit, right? And it is that global South movements have said for decades the climate crisis is rooted in colonialism, in racism, in patriarchy, and extraction. So actually, yesterday wasn't just a meet and greet with the COP30 presidency. As I said, it was about accountability. It's about saying there cannot be some sort of partnership to deliver justice if you're not on the same level in terms of delivering that justice. And that means, in terms of that means reparations, right? So one of the most important things and the most important fights that are happening on the inside continues to be ensuring that it's rich colonial imperialist powers like the UK, like the US, like Canada and Australia, um, um, uh, who are continuing to block progress and to continue to be the sort of colonial blockers that they have been for so long. Um, demand accountability in terms of their historical responsibility in climate debt, and that includes, principles and um, kind of policies that are completely aligned with the public pathway approach around the type of finance that's needed, being public, being grant-based, non-debt creating, and so on and so forth. And when we're talking about what the funding is for, some of the key areas and the key parts that are happening the second week have to do around adaptation, have to do loss and damage, and very importantly, for us in the trade union movement and for everyone who's been working so hard to make the Just Transition Work Program um, um, survive on the one hand, but actually, move towards some possibilities of, relative potential success within this highly uh, difficult and challenging system, the possibility of a just transition mechanism, the possibility of transitioning, you know, on the principles of equity, of justice, of guaranteeing a dignified life for everyone. Which I just came from an action this morning, where we're calling for the dilemma action mechanism, which would be the kind of mechanism that would take the Just Transition Work Program forward and really solidify some infrastructure to push for that. And I think it was really powerful, and I think it speaks to kind of the vision that many of you share here, which is that the just transition needs to be kind of a structural response to the depth of the crisis that we're experiencing. And I really kind of it's the first day I'm in the blue zone, thankfully. And it was great to start the way the setting that way. Maybe just 1 minute more.
No, we may have lost Seb. Is Seb frozen for everybody else?
Yes, he is.
Okay, great. Um, it's funny because yes, the internet in the blue zone is in fact not great. But I think a lot of what Seb just summarized about the an analysis of power in the COP30 experience and the importance of trade unions continuing to build with social movements. And by social movements, I mean really like mass social movements, like MABI, MAS, MST, MAM, these are really movements of the working class of the global South. And they are the ones that take to the streets and that also, in the case of the indigenous movement, occupied the COP30 blue zone area until it was hyper militarized. And I think that also has to be said that this has been one of the most militarized COPs that I've experienced. And it's a little, it also speaks to, the where the some of the politics lie in the blue zone. As Seb mentioned, 1 in every 25 people in the COP30 blue zone is a fossil fuel lobbyist. Um, and this sort of disproportionate, like corporate, especially like, private corporate, we're not talking about state-owned energy, but private corporate multinational companies having a completely disproportionate role, I think continues to be the case as we've seen in prior COPs. That's nothing new. But highlighting really the importance of the labor movement being at the forefront of the fight to reclaim energy as a public good. Seb, I see you're there. Do you want to finish off with that last comment? I think we have you back.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Do you think as soon as I started talking about the actions that we're going to be taking here, uh, the the internet drops? Maybe it's not a coincidence. Um, but yeah, I guess yeah, I think really important to ensure that we carry the politics of the People Summit into the second week. So the People Summit will have different moments to do that, side events and press conferences and actions as well. But actually beyond that, right? So how do we ensure that there's momentum, that there's continuity, that Brazilian movements that haven't necessarily seen in the UNFCCC process a space to intervene and to build together. But have now through having COP here, made that possible in such a profound and powerful way. How do we carry that forward beyond COPs? What does that look like in terms of the power of Brazilian movements? What is the role of the Brazilian trade union movement? And maybe Fernando could speak to that a little bit later. But it's a hopeful time. It's a fertile time, and I guess it speaks to to that point you were making, Lala, where indigenous people, the Munduruku, traditional warriors of the Amazon, um, they don't see this COP as anything else than an act of war, and so they respond accordingly, like as if they're at war. And I think we should listen to that in terms of how we shape or attempt to shape the movement going forward. I'll end there, but thank you. I'm sorry for my connection.
Thank you so much, Seb. Um, and yeah, now we're going to connect to Fernando Vivaldo um, from CUT Brazil, who I think actually just dropped off. So let me pivot here, and I will also be let me see if I will also be presenting about the statement and my own impressions from the COP30 as the TUED representative here. But let me see first if we can go to Miss Ellen Davis White first, and then back to Fernando, if that order is okay. And I think Brian, if I'm not mistaken, you're going to do the introduction. So Brian, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Kamanzi. For those who haven't met me, I am a researcher with Trade Unions for Energy Democracy. And, you know, while parallel to everything that is happening that we've heard from Sib and Lara in Belém in Brazil, for those of you who don't know and for those of you who do, a reminder that a Category 5 hurricane hit the Caribbean just before the COP proceedings, hitting Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, most affected, and Cuba. I'm not sure if any other islands were impacted. My wife and child actually were in Jamaica during this time, so I got a little bit of insight into the terrible things that took place, particularly in the western part of the country. And I think there's a great and difficult irony within the conversations around just transition and finance about obviously who pollutes and who is most impacted, and really having to notice also what the impacts of the legacies of unequal development of infrastructure and also the consistent and contemporary fights to realize universal public service delivery, how those things come together, and also what the real life-threatening implications of those fights are. We decided to reach out to PSI affiliates in the Caribbean region, and we're very grateful to have Helen Davis White, who's a Jamaican trade unionist, the General Secretary of the Jamaican Association of Local Government Officers, to tell us a little bit about what has been happening in the wake of Hurricane Melissa, a very important parallel conversation to everything that is happening in COP. So thank you so much, Helen, for joining us today, and we look forward to meeting you and having you in this space.
Thank you very much, Brian. First, I must apologize because our communications are not yet what they should be after the hurricane. So I am not going to be able to have my video on in order to ensure that I am able to complete the discussion. But yes, Category 5 hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica just over 2 weeks ago. And we are now in the aftermath of the hurricane, actually trying to establish just exactly what the damage has been and, you know, how we put in place recovery measures that will ensure that we actually build back better, as you know, is the call whenever we have these kinds of events, that we should take the opportunity to build back better. In terms of a Category 5 hurricane and what it has meant for Jamaica, I would say thankfully the entire Jamaica did not actually suffer the effects of Hurricane Melissa. In fact, I would actually describe as what is happening now as a tale of two Jamaicas. In the eastern end of the island, things are almost continuing normally. But once you travel and start to go westward, you recognize exactly what has happened in terms of the effects of the hurricane. This is something that we have never seen in Jamaica. And, you know, mention was made of the whole talk and action in relation to, you know, who in the world are the polluters and who actually are the ones who feel the effects of the pollution that has been going on for umpteen years, and which we have been trying to get done through measures like the COP and what it represents. Small island developing states, like the states of the Caribbean, are the ones who are actually feeling the brunt of the what is happening in terms of the pollution of our space in the world today. And so what we have in Jamaica, as with most small island developing states, are problems with our coastline in terms of the damage that is being done on a daily basis, and how that actually affects the delivery of public services. One of the things that we have seen with Hurricane Melissa is that development in Jamaica has primarily been along the coastline. So a lot of our public infrastructure is in fact on the coastline. So the two parishes in Jamaica that were terribly affected are Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth, but there are other parishes that did suffer damage, including St. James and Trelawney. In the parishes of Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth, most of our municipal and other public infrastructure were damaged. I actually traveled out to Westmoreland on Thursday to see what was happening with our members in that parish. And what we found was that the parish council, which is the municipal structure that exists in the parish, was very badly damaged, and so they could not be operating from the parish council building. We had facilities in our infirmaries which really deal with the less fortunate through providing care, residential care, and at least two of the buildings there had been damaged. The one in St. Elizabeth had also been damaged from the reports that we had gotten, to the extent where males and females were being housed in the same space because the other buildings had been damaged. When we looked, the police station was damaged, so most of the police officers were operating from the yard. Thankfully, the fire station in Savlamar, where my union actually represents staff, that was probably the only public building that was not damaged. The hospital in Black River had been totally decimated. Similarly, the hospital in St. James and in Savlamar had also been damaged. So what we have found coming out of Hurricane Melissa is that the delivery of public services have been severely affected, as a result of which we are now having problems with waterborne diseases, because the water supply systems were also affected, and people, many of whom were without water for days. And whatever water they are able to find now, people are not really concerned about whether it is to the standard it should be. And so we have actually had cases of leptospirosis, and now our public health authorities have to be scrambling to try to ensure that waterborne diseases are kept at a minimum. And of course, one of the major problems, apart from the damage to public infrastructure, is also the fact that our public emergency workers many of them have been severely affected, and they have to be at work just the same. So as an example, when I got to the fire station in Savlamar in Westmoreland on Thursday, the report that we had, and we were not able to get any information because communications are almost 100% down in the parish. When I got there, I was told that close to 80% of the staff had either suffered total destruction of their homes, or they had lost roofs, or had been flooded out. But yet still, most, if not all of them, were at work to provide the services that were needed in the aftermath of the hurricane. And that has been detailed. So our public health workers, including those who have to deal with vector-borne diseases, because that's something that you are expecting will be happening, and we want to ensure that we don't have cases of malaria, dengue, and whatever other vector-borne diseases there are. Those workers also have to be at work regardless of, what their experience may have been as a result of Hurricane Melissa. What that is saying to us too, when we look at, these public buildings and the public infrastructure generally, is that we have not been investing the way we should have been in our public sector. And so if in fact it were even a hurricane of a lesser magnitude, we would also have problems, because a lot of, based on the fact that Jamaica has had an economic program that focused really on, controlling our debt to GDP, what that has meant is that their money that should have been invested in our public infrastructure has not been able to be used that way. And so you have a lot of our public systems that are not at the level that they should have been, based on what we have been doing in terms of trying to correct our economic problems. And so what that is saying to us as trade unions is that we have to continue that fight to ensure that there is increased investment in our public infrastructure, because not only from the standpoint of the workers who work in the sector, but from the standpoint of the citizens who are expecting to receive these services, what we in our trade union sphere call quality public services, that our citizens should be in fact able to receive quality public services. And our call has been in recent times, and it is saying to us, coming out of Hurricane Melissa, that we have to increase our efforts to ensure that our public budgets are put together in such a way that there is a focus on investing in our public infrastructure to ensure that not only our workers, but the citizens of Jamaica are protected, are able to receive quality public services, because without that, we are basically saying this thing about correcting our economic problems will not really be of any value to the citizens of Jamaica if they are unable to see any benefits that really come from that. So as we speak, our workers are out there trying to ensure that the recovery efforts are, moving at a pace that will ensure that the citizens of the West in particular are able to return to some kind of normality, while we recognize that this business of recovery, based on the intensity of the storm and the effects, is going to actually take several years for us to see anything close to recovery. But at least for the time being, for our workers, our citizens to come back to some kind of normality in terms of their daily lives. One last thing I would want to mention in terms of our energy sector, um, our light and power company has been privatized for several years, several decades. It was actually privatized. The government still has, I think, about a 20% stake in the company, but it is largely a privately owned and operated company. However, the government does have in place an energy policy, which indicates that they would want us to move to at least 50% renewables by 2030. I must say that I don't see that happening based on the current trajectory, but that was a plan to move to more and more renewables. And I know that the light and power company has had to make their plans such that they take that into account as well, the move to renewable energy. And they have started a process of converting from petroleum based products to natural gas. So that has started. But the truth is that this is not something that is actually it's not a government run company, and so the private company has to really operate within the context of government policy that is set from time to time. And the current policy is that we should be moving to 50% renewable in terms of our energy grid by 2030. So for now, that is where I would want to stop.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Really appreciate you having you on here. I know there are many other tasks that are pulling at you at this urgent time. We also want to acknowledge we do have some comrades from Philippines in this call, and the Philippines has been hit by a severe typhoon, leaving millions without power since the inception of the storm. I think over half of the grid has been brought back up online, but it's worthwhile just saying in this conversation, parallel to how we are talking about COP, is that workers are on the front line of responding to the climate crisis. They are also the first point. Public workers are the first workers also who people are expecting to return. There is a common sense understanding that power is a basic good, a public good, and that even when there are storms, that you need power to sustain elements of your life, and that people are looking to power workers to actually fulfill that, in spite of the things that are even happening with their own families. So that has to be a part of this conversation, a part of our understanding, and also really to juxtapose it to the inaction that we are seeing in Brazil, and seeing that workers are actually, are the ones who are standing up, while some of the elites at COP are hiding behind security. So over to you, Lana.
Thank you so much for that presentation and for really highlighting the way that inequalities are multiplied by capitalism's made disasters, and all our solidarity, comrade. So now we are going to go back to COP30, back to on the ground in the trade union representation at COP30. And it's my honor to invite Fernando Vivaldo to the that we can't stress enough how much Fernando has been at the front lines of the trade union presence in this COP30, both inside and outside, and in the People's Summit. It's just really incredible. Fernando is the advisor to the Secretary of International Relations at CUT Brazil, and has been really, exactly as Seb is saying, the bridge between social movements, between government representatives, between negotiations, and our trade union movement. So Fernando, welcome. And if you could share with us in Spanish or English, whatever you prefer, the your analysis of the power relations at COP30 and also what your experience has been like at COP30 behind the scenes organizing trade union demands. So the floor is yours, Fernando, and thank you. Fernando?
Agora vocês me ouvem?
Sí, sí.
Ah, gracias, gracias. Disculpe, yo estoy muy cerca de una manifestación de los compañeros indígenas.
I'm sorry,
Entonces,
I'm very
talvez
close
ustedes
to a
possam
demonstration by indigenous
ouvir
people. I don't know
intervenção com
if
a
you
energia de los
can
compañeros
hear
de los
me
estados
well
do
with
Rio
all
Grande do
the other
Norte.
brothers and sisters who
Primeiro,
are
gostaria de agradecer as
um,
palavras de Lala,
protesting outside. First of all,
a
I'd like to
você,
thank
pelo
for
TUED,
Lala's
que é grande
words
parceiro do
and
ACUT.
for
Nós
the
outros do
TUED,
Brasil
which
sempre
is
hemos
a partner
pensado
of the
sua
CUT.
intervenção, nossa
We have
intervenção na
always
COP,
thought
tanto
about
dentro
your
como fora da
intervention and
COP
your
e en la cumbre de
intervention
los pueblos.
in the
Como
COP
ustedes saben,
and
tuvimos
in
uma
the
gran movilização
People's
de la
Summit.
cumbre com alrededor de
You know that
75
there was a great
personas,
mobilization of
trabajadores,
the
sindicalistas, pueblos
summit
indígenas,
with workers,
ambientalistas y movimientos sociales. Foi uma
environmentalists,
massa muy
indigenous
potente,
peoples,
uma gran victoria de los
working
compañeros de
people,
todo
and
lado
all
a partir
social movements.
de
It
la
was a
cumbre de los
great
pueblos,
victory of
uma
all the
grande,
organizations
uma
from
grande
the People's Summit.
repercussão en las
It
redes,
had
en la
great
imprensa.
repercussion
Entonces fue
in the
una victoria,
networks.
un
So
proceso
it was
muy,
a
muy
great
potente
victory,
y que
a
fue
very
necesario mucho
powerful
trabajo, mucha
process
construcción colectiva,
that demanded
pero
a
o
lot of
resultado fue muy,
collective
muy bueno, muy
building, a lot of
importante.
work, and it
Depois
was
de
very
diversas COPs
important.
que no
And
habíamos
after
como
many other
hacer
COPs
cualquier tipo
where
de
we could
manifestación,
not
¿no?
do any type of
Esto
demonstration,
estuvimos en Egipto, en Dubái,
we
en
were
Bakú, en
in
Azerbaiyán, y
Egypt,
ahora en Brasil
Dubai,
conseguimos estar
Baku,
tanto en la
and
COP quanto en las
Azerbaijan,
calles,
and now we were
protestando
able to be on the
nuestras
streets,
reivindicaciones y esto es muy
protesting,
importante.
demonstrating with all of our
Esta,
demands.
como
This is very
comentado,
important.
es la COP con la
As you
mayor
know, this
participación
is
de
the
la
COP with
indígena
the
de la
greatest
historia, pero ainda
participation
necesitamos
of
hacer mucho
indigenous
más, ¿no?
people in history.
Tenemos que escuchar sus
We
voces,
must
sus
have a lot
protestos
more.
que
We
son
must hear their
legítimos, a pesar de
voices,
ser
their
legítimos.
protests that are
Tenemos
absolutely
que
legitimate,
hacer
and
oírlos
we
sus
need to
reivindicaciones,
hear
sus
them.
peticiones,
We
su
must
intervención
hear
en todo
their
este proceso. Para
stance
nosotros
in
es
this
muy, muy
whole
importante
process.
estar
For
junto
us,
con los
it's
movimientos de los pueblos
extremely important
indígenas
to be together with
mismo
the
con toda
indigenous
esta
movements,
participación ahí
with
hay que
all this
reforzar esa más su
participation, and we
participación, sus
should
intervenciones
reinforce their
que hace
participation,
visto
their
que tenemos que
interventions
presionar
even
ainda
more.
más
And
porque
we
el
have to
gobierno
put
Lula
more
es un gobierno
pressure
aliado de los
because the
movimientos
Lula
y de los
administration
trabajadores, pero
is an
como
ally
todo
of the
gobierno es
workers, but
preciso
as
presionar y
every
presionar y presionar
government, we
que
needs to
manter
be
nuestra
pressured,
independencia
pressured, pressure. We
de los
must put a lot
sindicatos,
of
de los
pressure
movimientos
for
sociales, de las
our
protestas, de los
independence, for our
compañeros
trade
indígenas que están
unions, for
saliendo como
social
nunca a las
movements,
calles para
and
protestar.
for our
Tenemos
sisters
una
and
gran
brothers
participación
from
sindical,
the
una
indigenous
marcha muy
peoples and their
potente.
movements.
Tuvimos
We must have a
los
trade
compañeros
union
del PEN,
participation, a very
TUED,
important
tuvimos
march.
otros
We
movimientos que
have
estuvimos
all
en
of our
la,
brothers and
el proceso
sisters
de
from
Just
Khan
Transition Rising,
and from
lo
the other
proceso de
movements in
l'Oban,
the
entonces
process
conseguimos
of
ter una gran participación de
the
los sindicatos, de los
Oban
movimientos
with great
aliados, de
participation
TUED, de
of
la marcha.
allies, trade
Acredito
unions.
que
And
allá,
I
além de la
believe that
marcha, tenemos que en los
besides
próximos
the
procesos
march,
reforzar
I
nuestra
believe
participación
that
como
in the
organización social
next
en el
processes, we must
proceso
reinforce our
político de la
participation of
marcha,
social
de la
movements
cumbre, no
in the
apenas de la marcha,
political
pero también
processes
influenciar mucho más, participar más,
of
estar
the
más junto con los
People's
movimientos de la
Summit.
cumbre de los pueblos.
We
Fue un
must
proceso muy
participate even
importante,
more. It
tenemos un
was a
trabajo muy
very
bueno, pero
important
podemos hacer
work.
mucho
We
más
did
todavía,
good
pienso.
work, but we
Pero
can do a lot
es un
more.
proceso,
It's
hace
a
mucho tiempo no había
process.
cumbre de los
and until we hadn't had a People's Summit in a long time. So now we need, as social movement and labor movement, we must participate more in the next summit. Besides that, we have the statement by the president of COP, the ministers of Lula, and they will have a great party and celebration in the central square of the city of Belém. We want to have great participation. The summit was very successful, and we have to reinforce it even more. In the summit, we from the CUT Brazil, we had a space to have our conversations, plenary meetings of CUT with social movements. In the summit, we have other launching of Amazonian works, and we have events with our sisters from Korea, and we have a great meeting of the ITUC and TUCA in the space of the CUT in order to organize the trade union intervention in the next days of the COP and to have a balance of the 6 days. It's very important. We also carried out many events with the Brazilian trade unions, with FUPE, which is the Federation of Oil Workers, and it's very important, this sector. It's very important to include our brothers and sisters from oil and gas, because they will be affected in the energy production in the next years. And as for COP, I don't know how long I can speak, but we have a very important intervention by President Lula at the opening of COP, and he presented the plans to do away with the dependence on fossil fuels, and he wants to implement freedom for humanity that uses fossil fuel. And he talked about the opinion of experts from scientists, and also the management by women. And also we were able to include our bargaining tables in Belém. There's a bargaining table open with clear divergence among the countries in terms of social development, the demand of social movements of rich countries, including Canada and Norway, and many others that want to have fossil fuels blocked. And we also want to have a work program that is just and permanent. Also, we have been working for many years, talking to the president of COP. We have many of you were at the trade union COP with the negotiator of Brazil, negotiators from France, and we launched the for president's candidate. So for many, many months, we worked inside and outside the summit, the People's Summit, and also demanding our own demands and our own bargaining. And the Brazilian government is an ally, but there are contradictions. There is independence of CUT regarding the other social movements. We will continue to fight and to take our demands to him, to the government, and to the COP. We believe COP is a very important process, but there's many contradictions. There is an excessive participation of capital. Many of the environmental trade unionists are not so happy about that. We have to keep our eyes in these bargaining tables. We have to take our stand. and we have to continue. The struggle never ends with the COP.
We still have a lot to fight for, and that's what we are doing here. So again, thank you, brothers and sisters. Thank you, Lala, for this invitation. Thank you all.
Muito obrigada, compañero. Muchas gracias por ese
Thank you
thank you
very
for that
much for
leadership
your
that you have
leadership.
shown in CUT Brasil. And that wraps up our reports from comrades in COP30. Now I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Oh, let's see, try that again. Okay. Does everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to share a little bit about the messaging of the public pathway at COP30 and share with just the statement that nearly 100 unions have signed and which we're going to present at COP30. But first, so this photo is our beautiful delegation here at COP. Some of our events have been in national pavilions, such as the Columbia Pavilion, where we presented with the Electrical Workers Union and the CUT Brasil, as well as partner researchers. And it was very exciting to have the former Minister of Mines and Energy of Colombia, Andrés Camacho, join us and really reinforce the Colombian experience that has been fighting against the private ownership of energy, reclaiming and restoring energy companies to public ownership, and creating state holdings of small hydroelectric dams into larger, so state holdings where they can use economies of scale. And so being creative about public ownership, as well as owned renewable energy in the north of Colombia, as is the case of Ecopetrol's ownership of an onshore wind project. We also partnered with research centers such as Lab, which works with labor communications, translating messaging of trade unions and the public pathway into booklets for political education of unions. And here again, we met with government representatives, in this case, the labor minister, former vice labor minister of Spain. And as Fernando just mentioned, we also were in the FUPI panel where once again the labor minister of Brazil was present along with various research centers and Antonio Lisboa of CUT Brasil. And we shared the experience of the Colombian oil and gas workers' plan for energy sovereignty and a just transition at this panel, which is a project that I guess personally I've been working for as the Latin America coordinator at TUED for the past year or so. And one of the most rewarding events was in the Cúpula dos Povos, where we presented the report that Pablo earlier today spoke about. And then we also had comrades who organized their own panels, such as the Korean comrades from KCTU, who organized Just Transition and the Korean Experience, which was really fantastic. And then the ITUC Strategy Day was yesterday, and several comrades talked about the danger of, especially the UGTT comrades from Tunisia, cited TUED texts and talked about the danger of the IPPP and in general the energy for profit model and an export-based model of energy where the energy is produced for Europe and not for energy sovereignty or the Tunisian people. And lastly, this morning, today, there was the BAM action, the Belém Action Mechanism action, which places a just transition demands from the labor movement on the negotiation table. And lastly, we've also had some Palestine events. I couldn't put all the images, but this was just one on our first day with trade unions from the coal workers of Colombia and the oil workers of Brazil present once again, as TUED has done, supporting the global energy embargo for a free Palestine. And so lastly, before opening it up for discussion and then passing the microphone to Sean, I want to talk a little bit about the statement that hopefully many of you have seen. So this statement titled "For the Many, Not the Few, COP30 Must Signal a New Policy Direction" is a Global South trade union statement that nearly 100 unions from the Global South have signed as a reference for how we are approaching this COP30 and what our main talking points are. So first, what are we going to do with this document? We're going to present it at COP30. I'm going to have the honor of doing that on the Climate Pavilion on the 19th of November, a few days before the closure of COP30. And we're hoping to get some press around this. We'll also be sending it out as a bulletin. And I just want to go over the three main points of this statement. So the first one is really to acknowledge the crisis of climate policy. The statement highlights that it's abundantly clear that the investor-focused, market and profit-driven approach to climate change has really been unraveling for the past 3 decades, and that a new policy approach is not only necessary, but that the trade union movement has been at the forefront of pointing out why the neoliberal model has failed. And one COP after the other claims that we need, I think Lula, which of course is is an ally government, but opened the COP by saying that we are moving in the right direction and we just need to go faster. And to me, that's like saying we are on a bicycle pedaling to the moon and we just need to go faster. Really, the medium that we're using to get to where we need to address climate crisis is the wrong medium. Uh, it has not provided the results we need, and a for-profit system to address the climate change will lead us off a cliff. It will lead to failure. We have seen this once and again. We do not need more ambition. We need to change the strategy. We need to decommodify energy and reclaim public ownership of point. And again, really highlighting that private companies are not going to share skills and technologies for the benefit of all. They are going to continue to restrict access to these resources in order to gain competitive advantage over their rivals. It has been really interesting to see the China pavilion. Of course, we know there is no US delegation, but there's of course that geopolitics plays into this. And the UNFCCC needs to acknowledge that there can be no effective climate policy if private interests are allowed to continue to look after their own profit-making interests. The second point is pay attention. Workers of all countries are demanding change. So we see that there's a growing number of working class people who view climate policies, of course, as a burden, not as a benefit. And that has really limited in the social and in the trade union movements, some of the alternatives that we push forward because we are fighting defensive battles, material survival, instead of being able to really think of, or not, it's not think of this, but like push forward alternatives um, that are ambitious enough to actually provide benefits to the working class and address systemic inequality, of course, which patriarchy and systemic racism and colonialism are tied to. We know that, and I'm quoting now from the statement, that for many unions, the main challenge today is not ensuring that no one is left behind, quote unquote, because almost the entire working class is suffering intolerable levels of exploitation and security. And the statement highlights that the richest 1% own 45% of the wealth, and almost 3.6 billion people live on less than $7 a day. So really, what are we talking about when we say no one left at the table, when currently it is profoundly evident, violently evident, that that is exactly what is happening with a profit-driven energy transition? And the last point in section 2 is that we're seeing rebellions around the world, and that this is a clear indication that workers, and especially Gen Z, young people, are no longer willing to tolerate the increasing levels of the cost of living, of education, of basic necessities, and of inequality. Because we see that we have almost the world's first trillionaire, possibly in the making, while again, this rampant inequality is increasing and is projected to increase with the worsening of climate
Oi?
crisis, as was just highlighted by our
Não,
comrade
tá de boa.
in Jamaica,
Ah, não, porque
and our comrades
quando eu fui
very
falar,
likely
o
in
microfone
Philippines.
do fone não funcionou. E aí eu tive
Fernando,
que
can
falar
you mute?
com o do iPad e aí tava
Or
muito
Irene, can
barulho.
you please mute Fernando?
Not able.
Thank you. Okay. And then lastly, before opening it up for discussion, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about, or what your thoughts are on the reports, on the Jamaica report, and also on this statement. The third point, before passing it over to the floor, is that the public pathway, delivering global public goods, reclaim and restore vital services. So given everything previously said about point 1 and 2, we know that we need to fight for a public pathway. And this is really the messaging that we've brought to every single one of our actions, every single one of our panels. When we have side discussions, this is what TUED is bringing to COP30 with social movements, with trade unions, and with government representatives. We're saying that we call on the parties at COP30 to recognize the need for a radical policy shift. And again, I invite you to think of that bicycle pedaling to the moon. It's completely insufficient and very dangerous at this point. We need a radical policy shift towards a public pathway approach. This shift must be anchored in public financing and the extension of public ownership. And this is also a message that we brought to COP29 in Baku, which was the climate finance COP. And we said then, and we repeated now, that financing has been pledged by the rich countries, but rarely delivered. And this is really important. You know, there's a pledge, we applaud, but then it's rarely delivered, just like climate commitments. And it comes, more importantly, it comes with pro-privatization conditionalities that further entrench global South countries in debt, and do not allow us to actually plan our own energy transition. So we see this in the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, known as JETPs, which TUED has written about, published about, held meetings about. But it's really important to once again highlight that the World Bank's billions to trillions idea that public money would catalyze large amounts of private sector finance has not has not materialized. It has been a failure, and we must reject it for all the reasons that we mentioned. And lastly, we must help relieve the immense pressures of existing debt on global South countries. This is true everywhere from Argentina to Colombia to Bangladesh, and Indonesia, where protests are happening in part because our economies are strapped due to this debt. Many South countries already pay more in debt servicing than they commit to essential public services like education, health, basic public services, infrastructure, etc. So we call on this new policy framework that has to be grounded not in competition and profit making, but really in cooperation and in a public goods framing. So that is what the statement sort of says in a nutshell. And we're going to once again, as I said, present it at COP30 on this week, the second week of COP30, on the 19th of November. So let me stop sharing my screen and open up the floor before we hear from Sean. Or actually, sorry, I'm going to just take an executive decision because I'm seeing the time right now. Let me pass the microphone to Sean first, and then we'll open up for discussion from all of the previous sections, including Sean's presentation. And Sean, given time, I'd say let's aim for 10 to 12 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, comrades, and for your patience and determination. And thanks to the comrades who have been fighting for the public pathway, COP30, and the exemplary work of Lala getting things up and running. My presentation is not quite as good as hers, but let's move into it. So the title of this session is really a placeholder for a much, I think, longer and more in-depth discussion that must take place in the trade union movement in the coming months. There's been a lot of talk about climate reset. I'm going to summarize what's being said and what I think it indicates. Next slide, please, Irene. I don't see anything. There we go. Okay, so what's the argument? And first of all, what does it mean? You've got these elite people, Tony Blair, Jeffrey Sachs, Bill Gates, Michael Liebreich, all elderly or aging white guys, but that's secondary, in very comfortable circumstances, basically saying that the Paris Agreement is dead. And this is that the COPs should be ended. That's what Blair is implying, that it's pointless to go every year and talk about ambition and adopt new targets when it's quite clear that the governments are not reaching their targets. This is a big thing. It also reflects their own opinions, but really the reality that the targets that have been adopted in Paris, and then later on after Paris, the net zero targets, are not being achieved. Now, we could say that's a lack of political will. They are not being honest or whatever. This is a moralistic kind of approach. What's really happening is if you've got a market-driven approach to climate protection, an individual capitalist can't make money unless they've been heavily subsidized, then there will not be an energy transition. There will not be, climate targets will not be reached. So I think we know that, and I want to move on from that in a second. They also all of them refer to a social backlash against climate protection. But why is there a social backlash? They don't answer that question. It's because nearly all of the policies put in place to protect the climate serve private interests at the expense of public control and ownership, and also living standards. So they're saying there's a backlash, that's the policy, but rather than reject their own policy and admit their failure, they're doing a really dishonest thing here. And they're just saying, well, we'll just do what we can. Technologies will save us. In the case of Bill Gates, oh, look at China. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Look at China. There is cheap renewables. So that means the transition is doing okay. But this, I think, is a very important, this is a sign, a bellwether, if you like, of a really serious policy shift away from climate ambition towards something else around which they have not yet reached consensus. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a couple of examples of this acknowledgement of failure. This came out in April 2025. This Tony Blair, it's based on a paper that came out a year earlier. Too often, political leaders fear saying what many know to be true. The current approach isn't working. So he goes on and on about, we made these targets and we didn't reach them. And so it's an admission of failure. So we have to jump. The message of my presentation, and I think of the TUED message, is there is a turning point happening here that we must jump in and come forward aggressively and confidently with public pathway alternatives. Next slide, please. Not seeing. Okay. Okay, this is Michael Liebreich, who's been an opinion leader. He's not at Bloomberg New Energy Finance now. He's got his own thing going on, but he was one of the leading pro-market neoliberal thinkers on climate change and energy transition. And then it says he's referencing there's a fear that the current approach will lead to an increased cost of living and yet most likely fail to solve the problem. Looking around you, hand on heart, can you say these fears are unfounded? So again, to repeat, the message is coming through again that this has not been helpful to the working class. It's costing money. But why is it costing money? It's because so many governments are trying to de-risk the private profit and dividends to shareholders that are part of the climate policy architecture. This could be done in far less expensively and with much more public cooperation than has been pursued in the last period of time. Next slide, please. So this is Jeffrey Sachs. He's at COP30. This is a presentation I think he did a few days ago. The market signals are wrong. What's lacking almost everywhere are scaled, decisive plans of action. And I think this was a good statement here, and I highlighted in yellow. What's also lacking is finance for lower income, read 80% of the world's population, lower income and low income countries, because they're not creditworthy by traditional rating agency standards. Now, that may sound a little bit wonky, but what it really means is that their possibilities of delivering a profit to private investors are poor. Therefore, their credit rating goes down. Therefore, their ability to access finance is also impeded by high interest rates. And we end up using a capitalist tool to deliver a global public good. And of course, it's not going to work. But what is Sachs saying we do about the credit rating agencies? And I'm paraphrasing what he said in his presentation. He said, "I've been talking to them. I've been talking to them about it." Next slide, please. We don't want to belabor the point. So, okay, so just another word, there are defenders of the current policy. Nick Stern, I don't think I've done a presentation in the last 15 years without mentioning his name, so this one will be no different. Lord Stern now. He says, no, China's showing the way forward. And it's ironic because what he's saying is that look at their renewable energy capacity. It's more than half, it's exceeded 50%. This is the kind of misrepresentation of reality that we've come used to with the likes of Nick Stern. Capacity, I don't have time to explain it in detail, but capacity is not the same as electricity consumption, because we know that wind turbines and solar panels do not operate 24 hours a day. So wind and solar generate about 20% of China's electricity. That's a major accomplishment in and of itself, most of it through public support and public ownership, but it's basically not the same as a 50% production. That may sound a bit wonky, but we have to be very alert to this misrepresentation. Next slide, please. And I think this is probably the last one. So in this paper that was presented at the TUED TUED South Interregional Conference, these trends were kind of put out as a reality that climate policy is at a crossroads, and it raises a lot of questions for the movement on what our top line message should be. And I'll conclude with my final slide and mention what I think some of those questions are, and hopefully we can have a few minutes for discussion, if not now, then in the future. So we've talked, and we know that the movement has basically articulated a just transition work plan. Just transition has been a top message for the trade unions. But where is the transition, comrades? So if we're saying our job is to get a seat at the table, make sure that there's social dialogue, make sure that workers are not left behind, etc., etc., does this narrative capture the current reality? TUED, in its work, suggested it doesn't, and we've been suggesting that now for over a decade, that we need a much more political economy grounded approach. That's going to pose many challenges. So it brings me to the second point. If there is now growing agreement that we need a public pathway approach anchored in global public goods, public ownership, reform of the global finance system, how do we programmatically put that in front of not just the trade union movement, but also the climate justice movement and the other social movements who are being so brave and militant at the COP? We need this approach, we need this alternative, and we needed it yesterday. So that's, I think, a question we need to ask ourselves. If the COPs decline over the next couple of years, what space will we have in order to develop this program? How can we become a pole of attraction for all those hundreds of millions, billions of workers around the world who are despair at their own economic and social precariousness and also very concerned about climate change? So what we've got is the climate change is being used by the right wing as a reason for their poverty and the inequality and their struggles. And this, of course, is a narrative we reject. But how do we put forward perhaps a World Social Forum approach where we develop our own COP? Of course, that's perhaps bicycling in another direction with not too much fuel, but we need to discuss as a movement how we have that, create that space. So I'm going to conclude now, hopefully on a hopeful note. I think that the analysis that has been developed by the trade union movement around the public pathway has been right on target. I don't think there's been much we can say by way of, nobody has challenged it. Nobody in the movement has challenged it. Nobody among elite circles has challenged it. They probably don't want to know about it. But the reset they are proposing is not going to work. It's all over the place. We need to fill that vacuum somehow with our ideas and our programmatic proposals, and we need to get that out into the
Did others lose Sean as well?
Yes, I think he's frozen.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad that he was mostly able to conclude. So thank you, Comrade Sean. Oh, you're back. Do you want to finish what you were saying? Okay. All right. Okay, so comrades, thank you for your patience that we pushed back the discussion. But hopefully now with all of these report backs and presentations shared, we can have a rich discussion for the next 15 minutes. So please, if anybody has a something they want to respond to, please raise your hand. I had seen some hands up before. Comrade Ernest, please kick us off. Comrade Ernest Ouedraogo.
Oui, vous m'entendez?
About that.
Ah, c'est bon?
Oui.
OK. Alors, merci vos présentateurs, merci à vous tous. Et j'ai suivi avec attention les intervenants.
So can you hear me? Well, I was listening very carefully to the reports, and I could see that the true problems being caused And I want to repeat something that has already been said. I believe that the other states have shown their fragile position in terms of controlling and managing these companies. And we had a government that was under the influence of the World Bank, so they privatized the energy companies, and that was a disaster. Today, we have a new approach, so we speak about a new management where workers will be represented, also associations of consumers will be represented in the management of these companies, and so there is a shared management, but it's private management. It is a state-owned company that is under private management. So they look at their results, but the results are not thanks to an individual. I mean, because the state is the owner, is the only shareholder. So I believe that these management models, they cannot help us. They cannot help us because in this case, the profit, I mean, it is an organization that is based on profit. I mean, it is important for these companies to be able to design a strategic plan that is more long-term, and it's also necessary that we see a true commitment by the state in terms of providing the high-quality services. And in this contract, in this agreement, we have to include our goals. The state has to provide the means for these services to be provided. And there has to be an annual evaluation so that we can correct when things do not work well. And we now have a private management which is not being successful. And so the issue, where the funds, the proceeds are not going back to the state. And we also see a problem of water contamination. And I believe that the correct approach today would be if we could together build a partnership in the water supply companies with the participation of trade unions. The trade unions, they have to be represented to be able to monitor and check the work that is being done to provide the services so that we can build something strong that will last as in terms of services for the population. And this would be the contribution of the trade unions to COP30. But I believe today the voices of trade unions are not being heard in the negotiations of COP30. So first, it would be very important for us to respond to the documents that are being published. Although we may have a weak representation, we have to make the voice of trade unions be heard. So that's why I want to congratulate everyone who's participating. So thank you. That was it.
Thank you, comrade. And I'm sorry, could you just please introduce yourself, your union and your country?
Moi c'est
I am Ernest Abdoulaye. I am the General Secretary of the Trade Union of Burkina Faso Workers. So I'm based in Burkina Faso, and of course our trade union has existed since 1947, since we had our struggle for Burkina Faso independence. Okay?
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, comrade. I think that your comments about the need to have a trade union-led sort of accountability pressure for reclaimed public companies is really important, and it falls under that category of public company governance and how to really ensure that after public ownership, they're not just responding to the interests of investors, and stakeholders, but also or yeah, investors, and shareholders, but of the people, the needs of the people. And so I really appreciate your comments. We have now compañero Michael of CNM. Good.
Hola, buenas, buenas, Lala,
Hello,
querida.
hello. Good morning, my dear friends, dear Lala, all our sisters and brothers from TUED. I will keep my camera off because my connection is not so good today, but I just wanted to highlight that we also agree with the statement by TUED. We want to find the public path, and we also agree with the interventions that have been made so far in this meeting. I just want to highlight, sisters and brothers, that for the trade unions to be able to act, we have to pressure our government so that we have a public path. And together we can develop our decarbonized and sustainable economy in our own territories. And it's also necessary to pay attention to the imperialistic control that is now attempted in our territory. Today we have warships threatening to invade Venezuela, which is a sovereign territory. Whether we like the government or not, whether we have differences, or whether we do not agree with something in the Venezuelan government, this is a sovereign territory and no one can invade our America. So we are now going through this attack also in Colombia, one of the states that is working in terms of making public speeches to recover nature, to protect nature. We have removed many economic activities that could harm the Amazonic forest. And let me say that for us to have a public path, we must continue to criticize the behavior of the imperialism that is still the basis of our relations in the global south as well as the Eastern European countries. So thank you, and let's go to our victory always.
Thank you so much, comrade, and congratulations on now becoming the vice coordinator of Industrial Global Union. It's an honor to work with you, comrade Maicon, and also thank you both to your union, CNM CUT, for signing on to the COP30 statement, and also to Comrade Ernest, who spoke before you, of Unión Sindical des Trabajadores de Burkina. I can't speak French, I'm sorry, but thank you, Comrade Ernest, for also signing on your union. And we invite unions who have not yet signed on to please sign on. We're going to be presenting, as I said, on November 19th. There's still time. And we're going to close off our comments and our discussion with one more comrade, Comrade Orlando Cuello from Colombia, from the Coal Workers Union of Colombia. Welcome, Orlando. The floor is yours.
Hola, habla Orlando Cuello.
Hello, this is Orlando Cuello, General Secretary of the General Association of Workers in Coal and also worker for the CUT. Let me greet all our brothers and sisters, trade union leaders in this important meeting. talking about this topic that concerns the whole world, which is a fair energy transition. For us here in Colombia, in the north of La Guajira, we already have an economy that is reliant on coal, so reliant on transnational companies. We are united because we want to fight and struggle to force the transnational company to at least open a tripartite dialogue so that we follow the basic principles of the ILO for a fair energy transition. We are engaged in the struggle to improve labor conditions and economic diversification, but it has been very difficult for us to open a tripartite dialogue with this transnational company, Encor, because the answer that they give to our movement and to the workers, to the trade union, is the violation of our rights. This is the response we have from the transnational company. The transnational companies, they move when they see their corporate image may be at risk in the world. And so I would like to ask for help for everyone because of the situation that we are currently facing in La Guajira, in Colombia, with the trade union of workers in coal. We are in this struggle and we need the transnational company, Gleifor, Glumo. So we need to exercise pressure so that the transnational company will feel pressured and they will have to open a tripartite dialogue with social responsibility. This is my comment to you. This is my message to you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Orlando. And yes, our brother Juan Carlos Solano was here representing Sintra Carbon in COP30, and he provided a few presentations, and he also spoke about the role of the proposal of eco minerals, which is a proposal by the Petros administration to have a national plan of mining as an alternative to the mining transnational private companies that run over the rights of workers and the rights of the communities and also the national sovereignty. And obviously, they have no respect for the environment. So this is a great alternative. Sintra Carbon has always been a strong organization in solidarity with the communities in the region, in solidarity with Palestine. So please receive all our solidarity. We will continue to work together. Thank you very much, Comrade Orlando. With that, we now conclude our global forum of COP30. So thank you all very much. Sisters, brothers, comrades, if you have not yet signed the statement that we are going to present on November 19, please do so. This is the opportunity for you to sign the statement, and please share our statement with other unions that could be interested in signing it as well. And we will also be sharing the final version in a TUED bulletin that will be handed out and disseminated throughout the TUED network. Thank you, and we will continue to work hard on the second week of COP30, talking about the public pathway and presenting energy as a fundamental human right. So if you want to open your cameras, we take a final picture. Thank you all very much.
Hasta la victoria siempre. Muchas gracias, compañeros, compañeras.
Me encanta ver sus caras.
Hasta luego,
Joshua!
compañera. Excelente.
Very happy to see you all. Thank you. This was an excellent meeting. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Agripina.
Thank you.
Fernando, chao. Fernando, gracias.